What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Dana White gets exposed by fighter. Fighter pay has been an extremely popular topic as of late, with the UFC currently fending off two cases in court. Through the Lee v. Zuffa case, more and more documents are coming out, revealing just how much the UFC paid many of its top fighters over the past 15 years. According to former champion Quentin Rampage Jackson, UFC CEO Dana White was directly responsible for him losing out on some pretty serious earnings throughout his career, especially after his fight with Chuck Liddell. During a recent episode of the Jackson podcast, Rampage spoke with Coach of the Year candidate Eric Nixick, where he explained,
I got nothing against Dana. At the end of the day, I got to respect Dana for being a businessman, but Dana took a lot of food out of my mouth too with a couple of things, with the Reebok deal, with my pay-per-view, deal after I fought Chuck. I'm keeping it 100. He took a lot of money out of my mouth.
As Jackson referenced, after his fight with Chuck Liddell, although the bout made him quite a bit of money, the UFC restructured his contract, resulting in him earning far less going forward after that fight, and leaving him with a bitter taste in his mouth. Next up, let's take a look at Aljamain Sterling reacts to UFC leak. Astute fans were quick to notice that in the background of a recent episode of the Full Send podcast with Dana White, two matchmaking boards were visible on camera. One of the boards that fans were able to get a glimpse of showed a February main event clash between Umar Nurmagomedov and Corey Sandhagen, which immediately went viral. Despite the excitement, the UFC has already announced a main event scrap between Joe Pyfer and Jack Hermansson for the same date. However, that hasn't stopped the discourse surrounding the Sandhagen-Nurmagomedov fight that had initially been planned. Although the UFC was forced to pivot, the promotion seems keen to rebook the fight once both men are healthy. Speaking in an interview with the Schmo, former bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling shared his thoughts on the situation.
They're giving him Umar, man. Unfortunately for him, it's because if he had not tore his tricep, he would be fighting Sean next. And I still even think that's weird because he beats Rob Font on short notice. Should he leapfrog Merab, being that Merab is the #1 contender?
Of course, as Sandhagen has previously explained, he has little interest in fighting Nurmagomedov, leaving fans to wonder just how the UFC plans to navigate the situation once these two bantamweight contenders are ready to return. Next up, let's take a look at UFC fighter gets arrested. Former UFC light heavyweight champion Jamal Hill was named in recent reports indicating that he had been arrested for domestic violence. Despite the way the situation was presented in many headlines, Hill was arrested not for domestic violence on a spouse, but for an altercation with his older brother. On the heels of reports surfacing indicating that Hill inflicted, quote, serious or aggravated injury on his brother, resulting in a misdemeanor count of aggravated assault, the former champ and his team released a statement via social media, which read, "The recent clickbait headlines about Jamal Hill were based on an alleged dispute between him and his older brother. Jamal adamantly maintains his innocence and denies the false accusations. We will not be commenting any more about this until the truth comes out in court." So far, it's unclear whether or not the situation will impact Hill's return to the octagon in the new year. According to MMA Junkie, the former champ is due back in court on January 22nd. While it's also remained unclear just when he'll return to the octagon in the new year, he had previously stated that he would like to return early next summer, where he'll take on Alex Pereira in hopes of reclaiming the belt he never lost inside the octagon. Now, let's shift gears and take a look at Paddy Pimblett and Bobby Green go back and forth. Heading into Bobby Green's upcoming short-notice clash at UFC Fight Night Austin this weekend, he has found himself in the crosshairs of streaking Scouser Paddy Pimblett, who's preparing for a big return to the octagon at UFC 296. Ahead of his fight with Tony Ferguson, Pimblett stated that with a win, he knows he's unlikely to be ranked given El Cucuy's 6-fight skid. However, he'd like to fight Bobby Green at UFC 300. He spoke on the Energized show, where he named Green and Grant Dawson as potential future opponents.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't see myself getting put in the top 15 after the win against Tony. I'll be perfectly honest. Bobby Green didn't, and Bobby Green beat him before I did. Know what I mean? So, I can see me fighting someone like that. Bobby Green, Grant Dawson, know what I mean? Someone like that to get in the rankings.
While speaking with media members ahead of this weekend's card, Green responded to the call-out, assuring fans that deep down, Pimblett doesn't want to fight him.
He really said that?
I believe he did.
Somebody sent me that, but like, you know, with Instagram and stuff, you be like, man, did they make this up? Did they just put the words in? I don't be knowing like who telling the truth or not. I'm like, bro, there's no way he called me out. Paddy, no, that's a bad fight for him. He don't want that. He just talking, okay? He just talking. Until he start walking, get through Tony and then we'll talk, you know? We'll talk after that, but Paddy don't want that. It'd be bad. It'd be a bad fight for him.
With Pimblett eager to return in a big way against Ferguson, a bout with another fan favorite like Bobby Green or Grant Dawson would be sure to attract plenty of attention. Of course, before the UFC looks to book a fight between the two, both men will have to win their next fights. Next, let's take a look at UFC Fight Updates. As we look ahead to the new year, the UFC has begun booking bouts for the highly anticipated Fight Night card in Saudi Arabia in March. Without further ado, let's jump into today's UFC Fight Updates, starting with a reported bout between Jeremiah Wells and Max Griffin on February 10th. The bout will see Wells look to bounce back from an August loss to Carlston Harris, while Griffin will look to bounce back from a July loss to Michael Morales. The following weekend, 2 fights have been added to the UFC 298 pay-per-view card, where Alexander Volkanovski will look to defend his featherweight title against Ilia Topuria. According to reports, the card will also now play host to a clash between Anthony Hernandez and Ikram Aliskerov, as well as a fight between Andrea Lee and Miranda Maverick. Hernandez will be entering this clash against Aliskerov amid an impressive 4-fight win streak that saw him dispatch of Edmund Shabazian back in May. In the meantime, Aliskerov will be looking to build on a sensational winning streak of his own that has seen him rattle off 2 first-round knockouts since joining the UFC. As previously mentioned, the card will also play host to a scrap between Andrea Lee and Miranda Maverick, which will see Lee look to snap a 3-fight skid, and Maverick look to build on a July win over Priscilla Cachoeira. Last but certainly not least, reports have indicated that Eric Anders and Jamie Pickett will compete at UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia on March 2nd, in a bout that will see Anders look to bounce back from a June loss to Marc-Andre Barriault, while Pickett looks to snap a 4-fight skid in what could be his final bout with the UFC. With the UFC now booking fights for March, it seems to be only a matter of time before the UFC 300 card begins to start taking shape. Next, let's take a look at who's going to headline UFC 300. Although Dana White previously stated that Conor McGregor would be returning to the octagon next summer rather than at UFC 300 as many expected, fans have theorized that the promotion is simply trying to disguise the booking in order to surprise fans with McGregor's return closer to the event. Despite fighters like Sugar Sean O'Malley saying that the historic card must include McGregor, Ben Askren believes that there's an opportunity for the UFC to book a massive Pereira-Adesanya trilogy fight on the card. He spoke during a recent video for From the Stands, where he theorized about the UFC 300 headliner.
I thought maybe he'd go bump up to fight Pereira again, because Pereira seems to want that. So I think that's one route you could go, Pereira versus Adesanya. I think people would be into that. People would be really into the return of Conor McGregor, but I'm not sold it's actually happening. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting. Yeah. It may happen, it may not. We'll see.
As Askren explained, he would also enjoy seeing interim heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall compete on the card, given the fact that if the UFC keeps him on the sidelines until after the Jones vs. Miocic fight plays out, he'll likely be absent from competition for all of 2024. So far, the UFC brass has played its cards close to the vest in regards to the event, meaning fans will have to wait and see what the promotion has up its sleeve. Next, let's take a look at Israel Adesanya receives warning. After Israel Adesanya's stunning loss to Sean Strickland earlier this year, many figured that the last stylebender would want to avenge the loss in the new year. Despite that, the former champ has played coy when asked about his next fight, stating that he would not return until 2027. Although many believe that he was simply joking around and will return long before 2027, streaking contender Brendan Allen believes that if Adesanya sits on the sidelines for too long, he runs the risk of letting the division pass him by. He spoke with ESPN to discuss the situation.
I'm not sure what he's going to do. I guess he really is going to take some time off. I mean, good for him, but, it's never easy to come back after a long layoff. Things just evolve so fast. The guys get better. The top changes with these guys that are evolving so fast and that are young and hungry, and he's really going to have to come back a whole new guy to, depending on how long he stays out, he'll have to come back a whole new guy to even compete at the top. It's just crazy how fast everything evolves and how good guys get in such short periods of time.
Allen, of course, is fresh off a dominant win over Paul Craig, which made it 6 straight for the streaking contender. As he looks to continue his climb up the 185-pound ladder, he's made it clear that he has his sights set on a fight with a top-ranked contender in the new year. With Allen climbing the ranks and Khamzat Chimaev eager to cement his place as a top contender, the landscape of the middleweight division could look quite different once Adesanya returns. Khamzat Chimaev reveals bad news. He went on Instagram Live to discuss with fans about his next fight. He also mentioned that he's going into surgery. Here's what he had to say.
Another surgery, operation, 1-2 weeks. After that, to recovery, come back, smash that back.
Top comments. The MMA community is so full of casuals now, it's disgusting. So many of you talk without knowing WTF you're talking about. He's had on Yoel Romero and was talking to Joey Diaz pretty much the entire time, and that podcast was a massive success. He could easily invite a Portuguese translator on to communicate. Alex has been interviewed without any translators in the past. Joe isn't stupid, and he won't get him on the podcast without making appropriate arrangements. Am I the only one hoping that Ian Gary gets knocked out in December? Joe had Yoel on, and Joey Diaz of all people was the translator. People don't understand that talking in a three-way with a translator isn't the worst 2-hour conversation to listen to. You know how many times I've listened to athletes talk through an interpreter? The podcast will be fine. People are looking for a reason to complain. Izzy is transitioning and gonna take the 145 women's champion belt to be 2-time champion in 2027. He's so brave. Make sure to leave a comment and you might get featured in our next video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss any MMA news. Check out our video from yesterday if you missed it. See you tomorrow.